Welcome, everybody. He is the spreadsheet fiend. He's not Kieran McKenna or Kelvin McKenzie, but he's here every summer on the channel for our yearly check-in on the buffoonery that is Championship Football Finance. Kieran, how you doing, mate? Are you ready for a long 45 minutes or so?
Yeah, I think it could be. We're recording this on the 30th of June, which is the financial year end for the vast majority of clubs in the Championship. So those that are under a lot of pressure to comply with PSR will be looking at the exit door, I think in the top two divisions, as perhaps some elsewhere places in Europe. So, yeah, the phone has been buzzing all morning. I'll say no more than that.
You say no more than that. We'll come on. I've just added that to my agenda. People under pressure for PSR on June the 30th. By the way, this will probably go out after that. So anything, news moves fast, put it that way. Speaking of moving fast, can we just start off in general terms? Just talk to me about the accuracy of information, because what we talk about when we're talking about football finance is things that are reported on 12, 18 months after the fact. You can explain to the fine people what the benchmarking that goes on before the season is, but I'll see a social media account put out a lovely graphic, and then someone will tell me that Team X is eighth in the league, like in November or something, with the third lowest budget. To which I will say, you don't know that for a fact. Where have you got your information from? Can you talk to me about the tension and the difficulty in your job about trusted information in real time, and obviously people like yourself, but who should we trust?
Trust nobody. Big Brother is after us all, Ben, as far as I'm concerned. We are permanently looking in the rear view mirror when we are assessing football clubs as far as their finances are concerned. But if we're looking at the Championship in particular, you're assessed over a 3-year period. So potentially you'll have two-thirds of the position as far as a club is concerned. As for the accuracy of the numbers, everything is a little bit blurry because under the PSR rules, you are allowed to make adjustments for infrastructure spend. Well, there's a couple of figures I can pick out from the accounts, which in my opinion, are infrastructure spend, but I'm not saying that there are others. We don't know how much the academy costs to run. Very few clubs quote the academy figures. The only one that regularly does it is Aston Villa in the Premier League. And they say that their Category 1 academy costs somewhere in the region of £18 million a year to run. That's 300 grand a week, a lot of money. It'll be far less than that in the Championship. I know one academy manager who says my official budget is £6 million. And people not familiar with PSR, what we might describe as virtue spending. If you spend money on the academy, so youth development, that's to be encouraged. You spend money in infrastructure, better stadium, better facilities, supply, that can only improve football. If you spend money on the community schemes, football club community schemes, in terms of bang for buck, are absolutely brilliant because they open doors, they start conversations in ways that sort of traditional interactions between authority figures. I'm a university lecturer. If I go to a school and I've been asked to talk about, come gang, education's a really good thing. They say, go away, granddad. You don't know what our lives are like, and I don't. Whereas if I go in with a badge which says Queens Park Rangers Football Club, and in London, the first thing that you say is, okay, I'm from QPR. What teams do you support? And you, once you engage with people, you can start to build trust. You can start to build a relationship. So football's absolutely brilliant at that, and also the women's teams. And we've got some specific challenges as far as the women's team in some clubs in the Championship are concerned. So you make adjustments for that. But this particular academy manager says my official budget for the year is £6 million. I've actually got £2 million to spend. And what happens to the other four is that it gets allocated to me, but it's spent on the first team. And trying to sort of do a forensic audit of these things is time consuming and expensive. So there's an element of the EFL has to operate on a trust basis, and in an industry where I wouldn't trust a football club owner to not sell their own mother if it meant compliance with PSR, that does cause genuine problems. So I think you're right to be cautious as to the accuracy of the figures. As for this, we have the 8th biggest budget for the season. That can be true, and the reason for this.
Well, can you explain to people about the benchmarking numbers?
Yeah. My understanding is that the EFL sends out anonymised data. So these are the wage bills for all 24 clubs in the division. Now, you can identify from that where you are. So therefore, you can identify where you are in the table. And then it comes down to relationships and trust. You could build up a portfolio of knowledge along the lines of,
Would it have been fairly easy to identify Birmingham in League One in the anonymised budgets last year?
Yeah, absolutely. And there will be outliers in each division. And sometimes there are good relations between club owners. So therefore you get I'll show you yours, or I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And as you say, the likes of Birmingham in League One and Wrexham when they were in League Two, you can probably be there or thereabouts. And equally at the bottom end of League Two, that Accrington and Morecambe are going to be, if they're not top bottom two, they're going to be bottom 2 of 3, and we're close enough. So that's how the relationship operates. So you don't get to see the club and the number, but you do get to see the number. Now, if that number is leaked, and sometimes clubs will leak it because it's in their own interest to do so, then that becomes fact as far as social media is concerned. Doesn't mean that the club is actually releasing the correct number. No,
or they're going to actually spend that amount of money.
Yeah, because again, there's a belief that, based on my figures, the average weekly wage in the Championship is £14,000 a week. But if you take a look at the intricacies of a player's contract, in order to get that £14,000 a week, could be on a basic of 9,000. Then he's on an appearance fee of 3,000. If the club finishes in the playoffs, that's when he gets another 2.5. And if the club gets promoted, that goes up, and so on. So we do see heavily incentivized pay packages. And people say, well, the clubs that pay the biggest wages tend to get promoted. Yes, but they tend to pay the biggest wages because there are bonuses for being promoted as well. So there's an element of chicken and egg as far as the numbers are concerned. Yeah, as we all know, the clubs that have just been relegated from the Premier League because of the benefits of parachute payments, and you're locked into Premier League contracts, will tend to pay the highest wages. Sometimes an owner will even extend terms as far as an individual player's contract is concerned, if you want to keep that player whilst you're in the Championship because you want to have another go in terms of returning to the Premier League. I think Alexander Mitrovic is a classic example of that. He was certainly the highest paid player in the Championship, 3 seasons ago. I think that may have been surpassed when Leicester were in the Championship 2 years ago with a well-known, high-profile player. But
did he used to play for Stockbridge Steels?
Yeah, could be, but then individual players have circumstances that we don't. That player, for example, might have had to regularly buy his wife a new phone because it kept getting lost.
Well, it's a Red Bull, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Oh God, Kieran, I always come to you with like 6 questions, and now there's about 1,000 more I want to ask, which is frustrating. So I'll hold the PSR comment, but you heard it from the man himself. Do your due diligence. This is a public service. However beautiful the thumbnail on Twitter is, telling you that your team, and people will always cast their team in the most heroic, storyline possible. Just do your due diligence. And Kieran says it many times. It's about the glory of kicking the ball in the goal rather than, "Oh, we spent fewer pounds than you did."
Yeah, I've as somebody that is a football fan, I I find the interest in football finance completely baffling. I mean, I teach it for a living, and I'm very, very privileged to do so, and I get to meet some amazing people as a result of what I do. Yeah, I love music. Nobody cares how much money Robert Smith of the Cure earns. I can tell you uh, because I've got his accounts, because I've got everybody's accounts. But there isn't an interest in entertainment finance and cricket finance. Or supermarket finance to the same extent as there is in football, and this has always slightly baffled me. But at the same time, I'll be honest, I'm a beneficiary of it.
I was going to say, I want to talk to you and people want to hear from you. So there we go. It feels like all my questions are starting with something that annoys me, Kieran. But something that annoys me is when people talk about managers getting fired. And I think in the Championship, we're guaranteed 10 new managers in the dugout on round one. And that's before we've made the assumption that Danny Roll is not going to be heading back to Sheffield Wednesday prior to round one. So we could have 11 new managers. And we often hear, oh, managers are all right because they sign a 3-year contract and then when they get fired, they have the whole contract paid up. And I sit there thinking, well, okay, I've had contracts in my life when I've not been self-employed where I have to give 1 month's notice or, people get put on gardening leave maybe for 3 months if they're lucky. Can you tell me the truth? Surely these billion-pound organisations aren't giving a guy a 5-year contract and then are in a position where they have to pay him the entire wage, 100% of what he would have earned had he been working for them?
The answer, Ben, is it depends. So if I think about some of the employment sports lawyers that I've had the privilege to deal with, if you are a football manager and you are sacked, you have an obligation to try to find another job. So if you are seen as not applying for jobs, then potentially your former employer might be able to say, we're not going to give you your full payment. If you do find a job, then potentially the remaining element, on a monthly element, the remaining element of your salary effectively terminates at that point. I'm aware of one club who, at one particular point in time, not only was paying for the current manager, but was paying each month 6 former managers. They were a bit of a basket case at the time, and they couldn't afford this full payment. So there are complications. So you do have this obligation to try to find yourself employment. And if that employment is paid less than your current job, then sometimes you might have a top up. Sometimes managers will go and they'll be sort of on glorified gardening leave. So when Pochettino was sacked by Spurs, he didn't have much of an incentive to find himself another job. It was the same with Graham Potter at Chelsea. He'd signed a 6-year contract on £12 million a year. They sacked him a few months later. He didn't really have to try very hard for at least 12 months. And also, it's a bizarre job. I teach for the League Managers Association, and one of the things I always try to communicate, because I sort of try to give them an understanding as to how budgets work and to how the finances of football works as far as cost control in the individual divisions. And all of the focus on a coach stroke manager is on their ability to manage the dressing room. But my view is that managing the boardroom is more important, because it's the boardroom who are going to sack you. So
is it legal, Kieran? If I hire you as the manager of Ipswich or wherever on a 3-year deal on X amount of money, but you get relegated, can I not put a clause in your contract saying, well, if I sack you after you've relegated us, I'm not paying you your full amount up? Or is it, yeah?
Yes, it comes down to contract by contract. Now, I don't know this for certain because I've not seen the contracts and it wouldn't be privy, but I've certainly heard it from fairly senior sources. If we take the case of David Moyes at Manchester United, he had the unenviable role of following in the footsteps of Sir Alex Ferguson.
I think we call that a hospital pass, Kieran.
Yes. But Sir Alex was a big fan of his, and I believe he signed a 6-year contract. But there was a clause in the contract which said, should Manchester United fail to qualify for Europe in the first season, that the club only had to pay him up 12 months' notice, as opposed to the remainder of the contract. And if you go back to 2013-14, Manchester United played on the Sunday. I think this was sort of early to mid-April. They didn't have a great result, and that meant that they couldn't qualify for the Champions League / Europe the following season. And he was sacked 24 hours later. Because I remember having to go to Old Trafford, and Manchester United are very. I appreciate this is not a Premier League show, but Manchester United are a very, very prickly club, so they won't allow you to record AV on their premises. So therefore you have to go to the car park just outside Old Trafford with Old Trafford in the stadium, and we broadcast from there as far as our understanding of the rules concerned. So every contract is different. The manager needs an element of protection.
And Kieran, Manchester United would have more leverage in a negotiation than Charlton or Oxford would, yeah?
They would, but if the manager is good, then
manager wants to work as well, though. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And we saw when Graham Potter went from Swansea to Brighton, I think there was £2 million compensation. When Steve Bruce went from Sheffield Wednesday to Newcastle, which is probably the smartest thing that Dejan Chansiri has done in his race. Admittedly,
more from him later.
Yeah, but possibly. There's not a lot of competition.
And we think, Kieran, sorry to interrupt, Mark Ashton has a gargantuan number on Kieran McKenna's head after last summer as well.
Yes, yeah. So there are clauses that protect and benefit the club, and there are clauses that protect and benefit the player. The manager, and those ultimately are private. Football is unique, I think, as an industry, in that we think as football fans that players and managers are public property and they belong to us, and we're entitled to know about the intimate details of. I don't know your salary, Ben. You don't know mine, and because we're English, we're so polite, we wouldn't dream of asking each other as well. But when it comes to footballers' wages and players' wages and managers' wages, it's open season as far as the media and discussions are concerned.
There we go. Right, I want to talk to you about gambling sponsorship. So if it's okay, because you and I both work in the kind of football media space, can we just show our hands first? So am I right in saying that your podcast, you won't take any gambling sponsors? Is that correct?
At present, yes. I've got to be honest. Revenues are down in the podcast world. And in an ideal world, I quite like the idea of being completely independent of all industries. But I'm working with two other guys. I'm an academic. I've actually got a full-time.
Kieran, you're not going to be the bad guy in the conversation. I've got my mortgage went up 40%. I've got a 3-year-old daughter and a childminder to pay. So with my view on life and where I am at the moment and how much I enjoy this, I am in no position to turn down gambling or alcohol or any type of sponsorship. That's just, I know people will say in the comments, I just want to get our positions clear before we talk about, what football clubs decide to do. But I could go and get another job. Yeah, I get that. But that's my take. So sorry, continue.
So that's the present. That's the present position. But we always have an end of season sit down, and I'm a finance guy. We'll take a look at the numbers, and a decision will have to be made. Uh, and there's an element of hypocrisy, I think, potentially from my point of view in two ways. First of all, I gamble, and I gamble regularly. I normally gamble on Brighton Hove Albion to lose, because that's what I refer to as an emotional hedge. If I gamble on them to lose and they lose, I'm financially rewarded. If I gamble on them to lose and they win, I don't care. I even gambled on Crystal Palace to win the FA Cup, because they're our rivals, and it helped to soften the blow quite considerably. So there is that. I am critical of the gambling industry, and I've also spoken to all party parliamentary committees with regards to the impact of gambling as far as its relationship. And it's a symbiotic relationship with football. Football has benefited from gambling. Gambling has certainly benefited from football. So I'm not anti-gambling at all. I think.
Kieran, sorry,
Yeah.
can I just frame this as a question? Because the reason I'm asking, and I'm so glad I'm speaking to you today, is I often hear fans, and all the shirts are going to be released now, and a lot of them, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush, but I think there's a little bit of performative signalling sometimes, but I think some people are very genuinely against having gambling sponsors. Where do you stand on the tension between competition and marginal gains, and the difference between signing player A and B, who then takes the winning penalty in the playoff final, which then nets you 100 million quid's TV money, but you didn't get him because you didn't take the gambling sponsor, and how virtuous do you look now? Where do you stand on the tension? And if it's not shirts, maybe we can agree on that, and could it be elsewhere? Do you see where I'm going with this? I struggle with it.
Yeah, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I mean, the Premier League has a rule coming in 2026-27 that there will be no front of shirt sponsorship deals with the gambling industry. At the same time, you can have sleeve patches, you can have perimeter advertising, you can have the official gambling partner of the individual club. So, is that announcement just one of virtue signalling by the Premier League, and they'll actually recoup that money elsewhere? And if you replace gambling companies as we know them with a crypto sponsor, crypto is gambling with a small g. It is very much a speculative financial stroke digital asset. So I've actually got a lot of sympathy for clubs, because when I talk to chief executives and when I talk to marketing directors of clubs, they say, look, we're under pressure. Because
that's kind of my position.
Yeah. If the club is losing £400,000 a week, as is the average losses of a club in the Championship, and you've got a gambling sponsor, and they've got the deepest pockets in town, then why shouldn't you take that money? So I'm not hostile to gambling sponsorship. My beef has always been with the gambling industry itself, that it doesn't do enough work. It does do some work, but I think it could do more work to assist those for whom gambling is a lifestyle choice that they made at some point, which has enveloped them and is destroying their lives. And I think if the gambling industry upped its game to doing more than the bare minimum, and I think that's where they are at present, then I feel a lot more sympathetic. So no, I've been gambling probably since the age of 6, because I grew up in South London, and going to the bookies with my uncles was a weekly activity, and I'd gamble sixpence. So I think people think I'm anti-gambling. I'm not. I'm anti the lack of due care that the industry has to punters.
Brilliant stuff. We've tried to do that with a lightness of touch, and I think we've both showed our own hands there. Keep it nice and calm in the comments on that one. We'll probably clip that one out. Either view is neither right or wrong, and we're fascinated to hear from either. Right. This time last year, Kieran, when we spoke, we were having a discussion about Leicester City possibly getting a points deduction in the EFL. We are about to have the same discussion, but after one of the most bonkers, absurd episodes in kind of football governance that has happened since I've been. You go back, way further studying this stuff than I do. But since I've been doing this, I accept it now. It was what it was. We don't need to retread a poorly worded rule and your mate running rings around it in court and whatnot. Can you do a little bit of an explainer on Leicester and where are we now and what are we expecting? Well, and I've just fired Ruud van Nistelrooy. I was going to say, what are we expecting for so-and-so in the club this season? Just give me a little retrospective on the absurd events of last year.
Well, initially, the Premier League tried to hold a commission relating to the finances of Leicester City Football Club for the 3 years ended the 30th of June 2023. Now, as far as most people were concerned, Leicester City were a Premier League football club because they played
good one as well in the top 5. Yeah,
not that season. They finished 18th that season, 22-23. They were relegated in.
But in those numbers, there would have been some high finishes not long before. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, and their finances had been good. They had budgeted to finish top 8. And they were relegated. And the Premier League says, we think that you have breached the allowable limit for PSR, which is you're allowed to lose £105 million over 3 years, and therefore we want to instigate a commission. Leicester City said, but we transferred our share in the Premier League to the EFL on, it was the 16th of June, 2023. So therefore, at the 30th of June 2023, we're no longer a Premier League football club. So you can't prosecute us. And the Premier League says, oh, yes, we can. And the Leicester City board says,
spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, here comes Nick DeMarco. And anybody that has spent time with Nick DeMarco will realise he is brilliant at his job. I know Nick fairly well. Myself and my wife went out for a meal with him a few weeks ago in Brighton because I'm in Brighton. He spends part of his time in Brighton. One of the most fascinating people I've ever met in my life. And I'm not trying to big him up because I'm not. I know Nick. Giving all this nonsense.
We'll have plenty of Leeds and Southampton fans. No, not necessarily. Well, Leeds fans probably. They're the ones who really missed out, weren't they?
Yeah. And then at the same time, for season 23-24, Leicester City said, we think you've exceeded the financial rules for the 3 years ended the 30th of June 2023. We think, therefore, you need to follow a business plan.
Sorry, just quickly, the EFL, you mean? I think you said EFL. Leicester City, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So the EFL tried to instigate a business plan and some form of transfer embargo. And Leicester City went back to the EFL and says, we didn't play any football matches in the EFL those 3 seasons, so therefore you can't prosecute. So therefore, they entered a twilight zone. Effectively, for season 2022-23, they were neither part of the Premier League for regulatory purposes, nor were they part of the EFL. And as a consequence, they could be prosecuted by neither of those bodies. As we know, Leicester City were promoted in 23-24. And then there's been various legal cases taking place. We say legal cases, commissions and mediations and so on. The conclusion that the Premier League came to towards the end of last season, so it's only a couple, the Premier League changed its constitution and the EFL changed its constitution to tighten up those rules. And I often get corrected by lawyers. If I describe something as a loophole, as my legal friends will tell me, that's not a loophole, Kieran. That's a rule. You could say it's a poorly drafted rule. You could say it's a rule which has unforeseen consequences, but it's a rule that has been voted on by the clubs. So historically, if the Premier League did a commission into a club, which resulted in the conclusion that a points deduction would be appropriate, the EFL would not have been able to apply that, and vice versa. Whilst the EFL and the Premier League are not friends, as we know that from the distribution of money issue, they have decided to come together on this. So therefore, as we understand it, Leicester City have a high chance of being before a commission for the losses that they made in the 3 years ended the 30th of June 2024. That commission will be held by the Premier League, and if it results in a points deduction, that points deduction could be charged by the EFL. And in addition, and here going back to that, one of those first questions that you asked me, we know what the rear view mirror is. We don't know what's in our headlights. I think there's a fair chance that Leicester City could have lost money last season in the Premier League, because they won't have got, they've got a lot of TV money, but for finishing in the bottom three, you get far less than further up the table. So they could have had another breach of the of the loss rules, which means that they could come up on a separate set of charges from the EFL for the 3 years ended 30th, 24, 25. In which case, there is the potential to have 2 points deductions. There's also the potential
just to be clear, just to be clear, sorry, the first thing you spoke about is a revisiting of the historic thing that could have happened previously if they'd been in jurisdiction, right?
No. Again, we have to watch these 3-year slots. For the 3 years to June 23, Leicester are in the clear, because Nick DeMarco has ensured that that's the case, and that's been upheld. We've now got as a separate issue the 3 years to 2024, which could result in an EFL, so a Premier League charge. And if the financial results are bad for 24-25, there could be another set of charges from the EFL. So
got it.
Leicester City potentially could have 2 sets of points deductions this season. Equally, they could prove themselves to be innocent of all these charges, and it's I don't want to be accused of scaremongering, but I am concerned for their welfare from that perspective.
If it's kind of coming from both angles and they're banged to rights, would there be the possibility of a business plan straight away from the word go?
Yeah. I think the EFL will be awaiting confirmation of the transfer of Leicester City Football Club Limited, its share in the Premier League, which it will be giving to Leeds United or Burnley or Sunderland, and in return will be getting a share in the Football League Limited. And I would imagine Trevor Birch and his team will be saying, any chance of popping in for a chat?
And if you were the agent for any manager being approached by Leicester, would you be telling them, I think you might want to listen closely to what's happening from above before you think about taking that job?
For every football managerial vacancy, there are 20 people who want that job. I know people who have managed clubs in League Two who've effectively done it for expenses only, because they love the game.
And this is a year one parachute team, albeit with some bother.
Yeah. But that's tended to be in League Two because they wanted the exposure, they wanted the experience, they wanted to use that as a potential stepping stone as far as their career is concerned. Supply always exceeds demand, but whoever is the coach, and clearly Van Nistelrooy has gone, whoever is the coach, they're going to have a very challenging set of circumstances. It was noticeable that Leicester used the loan market, and of the 3 clubs that were promoted 2 seasons ago, they were the one who spent the least. That there are separate issues and rumours and conspiracy theories surrounding the financial position of the club owners as well.
Interesting. Get your thoughts in the comments on what Kieran's had to say if you're a Leicester fan on their Thai owners. And I think you all know where we're going now. We'll do our owner roundup in a minute, but some owners deserve their own special segment. And sorry, I shouldn't approach this like that because it sounds like I'm being sarky. And Sheffield Wednesday is a great football club, and to every set of fans, their club means as much to them as every other set of fans. But sometimes gallows humour is the only humour, or the only way to deal with this stuff. Where are we with Mr. Chansiri? He's turned down the American consortium last week. Think of that what you will. He knows wanted his £5 million down payment or £140 million valuation, or you'll know better than me, Kieran. We don't have a transfer embargo, but we have a fee limitation across 4 transfer windows that could take you up to 2027, which sounds a lot like a transfer embargo to me, Mr. Maguire. He's very honest. He's very emotional. But it's an absolute mess, and we need a sale for the Wednesday fans, or they're going to get relegated, aren't they? It's going to be like they're in administration all year. They can't sign any players. Nothing's going to happen, and all the good players are going to leave. They're going to want out. It's not going to be good for Wednesday. What are your thoughts going into 25-26 on Sheffield Wednesday and Mr. Chansiri?
Well, in the most recent set of finances, which is for 23-24, Sheffield Wednesday had the 4th lowest wage budget in the Championship, but players are still earning considerable amounts of money.
He's a good manager, that Danny Roll, isn't he?
He is a good manager, that Danny Roll. So Sheffield Wednesday punched above their weight. I think the fans are aware of it. The fans acknowledge that. Danny Roll deserves a lot of credit for that. If you take a look at the clubs that have been promoted, Birmingham have come up. They will have a top half budget. Wrexham have been promoted. They will have a top half budget. And Charlton, I think, for the third one, they will have a decent budget as well. So I'm not being critical here. When it was Rotherham and Yeovil and clubs that have been promoted to the Championship and Burton Albion, historically, they had done an amazing achievement to get to the Championship. The Championship next season is going to be incredibly competitive. And it's difficult to see how Sheffield Wednesday will, under the present regime, will have anything other than a bottom 3 wage budget. And as far as their recruitment of signing players is concerned, the position of the EFL is that the other clubs in the Championship have paid their wages on time. The other clubs have paid HMRC on time.
And this is not just the players, Kieran. This is to other staff working at Hillsborough, yeah?
Yeah, and this is where any sympathy I have for Dejan Chansiri, and I have to excuse my language here. I always say that there's 2 types of bad owners. There are idiots and there are arseholes. And I genuinely think that Dejan Chansiri is not an arsehole. He's not trying to antagonise Sheffield Wednesday fans. I think he's very naive. I think he's very inexperienced. I don't think he's trusted people, or I don't think he's put people into the right place in the club, which has allowed the potential of Sheffield Wednesday Football Club to be leveraged to being a more successful team. And he doesn't listen. And listening is a skill of senior management, in my view.
And Kieran, sorry, this is all with the backdrop of millions on Jordan Rhodes and Forestieri and Gary Hooper and whoever, and losing in the playoff final, 1 game away from the 100 million TV money, and not great since, basically.
And that's one of the wonderful things about football. That's one of the tragic things about football, is that it is a gamble. There is jeopardy. That's part of the reason why we love it. Even though I'm not a fan of either Sunderland or Sheffield United. I was in London on the day of the playoff final, and I was very privileged. I was invited to attend the final. So that was very kind of something. I didn't actually manage to make it, but I was in London, and even talking to the fans of both clubs afterwards, you sense the enormity of the occasion. And what else in life is that significant outside of what we truly consider to be important in life, which is our families and our loved ones and health and so on. Football is this classic, the most important of the unimportant things in life. So Dejan Chansiri could have been a hero, but he didn't get there. Since then, I think his public proclamations to fans have antagonised them. I do feel, as an outside observer, that he should have got some good people surrounding him.
At least doing his emails for him. Come on.
Yes, yeah.
So Kieran, if a knight in shining armour comes along to buy Sheffield Wednesday, how long would that take though? Because surely even if that person comes along, we're recording here on June the 30th and, we're essentially embargoed for the first transfer window and they might not be quick enough to keep Danny Roll. How quickly do we need something to happen here?
Football is an emotional industry, and you can get fairly positive vibes very, very quickly. You've only got to look at what's happened at Birmingham City. Birmingham, again, I think it's fair to say, had a poor owner, and on the back of that, they got relegated to League One as Knights Head Capital were coming in. But everybody I know who's a Blue is bouncing.
They're an excitable bunch at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah. and you as a football romantic, you've got to be really pleased for them. That they Villa have done really well, and it must be galling to be a Blues fan. So things can turn around if you create the right environment, if you get a good start to the season, and so on. But I think it is going to be very difficult. We don't know what the reaction of the EFL will be to prospective new owners coming in. There certainly have been bids. Those bids have not matched the valuation of Sheffield Wednesday Football Club that Dejan Chansiri has given. I've done my own sums. I think there's a significant gap between the figures that he apparently is quoting and what's being offered. And I think the first offers that I've seen come in, which I think were probably in the region of just over £40 million, I don't think that's a million miles off what the club is probably worth, given that you are inheriting a Hillsborough, which is a mess, which has been, it suffered from lack of TLC, a lack of investment for many, many years, and needs a significant spruce up. Going back to Birmingham City and their new owners, they seem really keen to invest in the infrastructure there. So it can be done, but it's timing in football is just as important as timing in politics and timing in comedy, and times aren't good at present for Wednesday.
No, get involved on that one in the comments. I know we've spoken a lot about it, but it's interesting to get Kieran's take as a bit more of an expert than me, just ranting and hoping for the best for the poor old Wednesday fans. Right, Kieran, let's round this out like we always do, and we'll do some slaps on the wrist and some slaps on the backs for some championship owners. Obviously, you've mentioned Knighthead Capital and the gorgeous Ryan and Rob joining the division to give us some little bit of a Hollywood sprinkle. Let me just start out by this, though, Kieran, that you, probably like me, were very interested in the Championship relegation zone last year because two of our Gold Star, Plymouth and Luton, were relegated. Okay, we missed the town at Cardiff. He was down the other end there. But well-run clubs get relegated, don't they, Kieran?
Yeah, I mean, Plymouth Argyle I think they had the second lowest losses in in the Championship in season 23-24, and it now looks as if there's going to be new external investment as far as the club is concerned. Therein lies the paradox of football. A well-run business doesn't necessarily transform into a successful football club. Newcastle United under Mike Ashley was a well-run business. It made profits most years. Didn't touch the sides as far as challenging for trophies are concerned, and anybody saw the excitement and joy that was on Tyneside when Newcastle United won the Carabao Cup. Saying, okay, well, yeah, it's me going, well, they lost a lot of money. Yeah, look here, the accountants here saying things aren't as good as they used to be, and the Geordie Nation are going, now stuff that, Kieran. We're having a party, and to be fair to them, they did say, and you're invited too. So very kind. So that there is that inbuilt tension as far as the industry is concerned, and that causes problems. Plymouth ran a tight ship off the field. They made mistakes in terms of recruiting coaches. The Wayne Rooney experiment apparently didn't work. And yet he could have turned it around in another 4 games for all we know. Anybody that's ever dealt with Wayne will say that he's a pretty astute guy. He gets a really bad press because he is the last street footballer of England, and people assess him on that. And also, management said it's 95% luck, 5% ability, and that comes from Pep Guardiola. The luck comes from having the biggest budget in football. The ability is making those marginal gains to players. So Plymouth Argyle had one of the lowest budgets. They were relegated. As far as Luton Town is concerned, and I know some fairly high-profile Luton Town fans, I think it's fair to say there has been a breakdown in the relationship between the board and the fan base.
That's a shame.
The balance of what they were going to do with the monies that had been generated from the Premier League, because they didn't spend money in the Premier League. The average Luton Town wage, and again, let's get out the world's smallest violin here. They were only averaging £25,000 a week. It's not worth getting out of bed for that, but that reflects upon the ability or the talent of the players that they were recruiting. They only spent £28 million signing players in season 23-24, which was by far the lowest of any club in the Premier League. And if you're coming from League One, Championship, Premier League, and you're not investing in players, then I think they did well to avoid being further down the Premier League. But last season was an absolute disaster. They were in receipt of £45 million worth of parachute payments. I expect Luton will have made substantial profits last season. This season, they will be in receipt of £36 million worth of parachute payments. The average club in League One will earn £1.8 million from TV. So Luton Town will get 20 times as much TV money as Rotherham, Bolton, whoever it may be.
Wow. Let's go through some other names before we get to Wrexham and Birmingham. Are we giving our normal slaps on the back to, I don't know, Doug King, the Berylson family at Millwall, Mr. Gibson at Middlesbrough? They're normally on our thumbs up radar, aren't they?
Yeah, and Steve at Bristol City as well. These people that put in somewhere between 10 to 20 million pounds a year, effectively running clubs as glorified hobbies. It is run as a business, but I don't know what your hobbies are, Ben, but mine all cost me money. But that's just part of it. You accept that, and the rewards are intangible rather than financial. So yes, Steve Gibson, every year he finds that 300 grand a week because he's a borough boy, and he's been a very generous owner. Preston, Millwall, Bristol City, they've all put their hands in their pockets on a regular basis during the season, and the reaction of fans is mixed. I think fans these days are a little bit more street savvy and aware that their club is losing money. The comment I get most of all is that they spent the money badly. No, nobody intends to sign useless centre forwards. That's all I would say. And what you perceive to be talent, there's 100 different factors that go into making a footballer a success at an individual club, and the transfer fee is one of those 100. It's getting a handle on the other 99 that's critical.
I'm very interested. We will get to Birmingham and Wrexham. I'm very interested in Mr. Ilachali at Hull, because we can look at owners. A, does the club win? B, like you've just said, are they benevolent? C, do they make a profit? And I'm sure nobody ticks all those three boxes across the whole 92. And Mr. Ilachali has removed managers, and obviously Liam Rossini went out and is doing better, and the guy he replaced him with completely bombed, and then he replaced him with someone else, and now he's gone as well, and he's got the job at Sheffield United, etc. And we've got another guy I've not heard of, but seems to be pretty aggressive in the transfer market every season. Is this guy just going to get it right at one point, get the right manager, or are you a little bit? Where are you placing Mr. Ilachali and Hull?
I mean, this then becomes sort of a football answer, not necessarily a football finance answer. There is a belief in society, and it's not one that I necessarily hold myself, that change is the same as improvement. And I think we fall into that trap, that mantra, as football fans, and sometimes club owners do as well. If I change the manager, things will improve. No, if you change the manager, things will change.
I used to work with a producer in my musician days who used to say, Ben, it's not better, it's just different. Yeah. You can turn the guitars up another 2 dB. Well, it's no better. Carry on.
And in my view, that's the position that we have as far as Hull City are concerned. Yes, he has put the money in. Hull City were losing 350 grand a week, and he's not the old owners, so he did have a wave of goodwill because the previous owners were very unpopular.
Right.
Yeah. To put it mildly, and I'm just looking at my numbers here, and Hull were paying £139 in wages for every £100 that came through the door. They certainly had spent decent money by Championship standards. They'd spent £8 or £9 million, and that's certainly higher than the median spend. I was a bit disappointed with the sacking of Liam, mainly because I've had the privilege of meeting Liam, and he's come across as one of the most smart thinking coaches that I've met. And this sounds glib. He and I were doing a show together at Sky, and he was just chatting in the canteen beforehand. And I'll be honest, Ben, I learned more about football tactically and technically in that 45 minutes than I have from watching football for 45 years as a fan. And he was sacked. And there was a viewpoint taken by the Hull fan base that he was well backed by the owner, and he was.
Yeah, he was.
That not just transfers but also the loan market, and he was. Was it too little, too late? How long does it take to turn around a tanker? And that's what you are dealing with the football club. And you've only got to look at his success this season. I think he's a very good man manager. But again, it goes back to the one man that you need to manage most of all in a football club is not your centre forward, it's your owner.
There you go. Right, let's round this out because we're coming out the hour. The owners, everyone's going to be looking at Birmingham and Wrexham. It's going to be a lot of fun, isn't it?
Yes, it's going to be box office. I think the new series of Welcome to Wrexham is just about to come out on.
I was on the last one predicting they weren't going to finish in the top 6 last year, so they mugged me off good and proper.
I feel duty bound to say that I'm followed by Ryan on Twitter, which
okay.
For somebody that teaches accounting for a living is about as surreal as it can be. So they will be very competitive. We've seen Paul Mullins already, a player who I think is a hero to many Wrexham fans, and certainly a central part to Welcome to Wrexham. Well, he's been shown the door. Mark Douan, effectively, I think he's being sent out on loan next season.
Got to Wigan,
yeah, and that's an early move. So they've been linked with every Premier League
every
footballer,
aging famous player in the world. Yeah.
If you're over 32 and you've appeared on Sky Sports on a Sunday afternoon, we've probably got your number. So I think it will be a fascinating season. I think it will be a really tough job for the manager, because now you are having to deal with football clubs who last season spent over £100 million on players. And this is not a criticism of your club, Ben, at all. I looked at the players that Ipswich Town signed and I said, that squad's been put together in terms of a promotion push in 25-26 more than a survival squad for 24-25. And so therefore they're in a strong position. Southampton, they've had some tough times. Southampton are still pretty sizable. You look at some of the players still there, they've got some. So it is going to be that much tougher. You're up against Derby County, who get 30,000. You're up against Sheffield, the 2 Sheffield teams. You're up against Borough, and so on. So, Wrexham have been the biggest fish in the pond for certainly National League and League Two, and then they were the second biggest fish in the pond in terms of following Birmingham City Football Club in League One. Next year, gloves are really off, and I think it will be a fascinating season stroke series as far as the club is concerned. You've got to give the people there some credit, including Sean Harvey. And
I never thought I'd hear you say that.
I always try to be as objective as I can. I'm still very proud that my Sean Harvey appreciation thread that I put up on Twitter about 5 years ago went viral at the time, as did the hashtag. Just as well, it wasn't the Sean Harvey information thread. Could have been worse. For those of you that love your acronyms. I think it will be intriguing. It will be tough. They are now dealing with a completely different beast.
And just round it out, I'm an Ipswich fan. I'm not looking forward to going away to Birmingham in round 1. As you said, that club is united, and I don't think anyone would be that surprised if they were pretty high up the league next season with Knighthead behind them.
Yes, they do have Knighthead behind them, but they also have the intricacies of PSR. Birmingham City will have lost a fortune in League One last season.
But the rules are different in League One than in the Championship, aren't they?
Yes, but in the Championship, you are assessed over your last 3 seasons, regardless of the division. So Birmingham will be limited in terms of their allowable losses. I anticipate if you're signing players for £15 million in the 3rd tier of English football, you're paying them accordingly. I fully anticipate Birmingham City's wage bill to be the highest wage bill in the history of League One. And it will be causing a ripple effect in terms of their ability to spend money this season. Having said that, as you
got
rightly say,
111 points, Kieran.
yeah, and if they hadn't, that would have been a pretty poor show.
Maybe, yeah.
It was a bit like the success of Celtic when Rangers had been booted out of the Scottish Premiership. If they didn't win that league by at least 30 points, then really they weren't trying hard enough.
There we go. Right, brilliant stuff. Kieran, you come on every single summer and put the world to right. So do check back, actually, to hear our conversations from going way back, and we can have a bit of a reminisce about me moaning about parachute payments for years and years, and now I support a team that's got 2 years of them. So how the world comes back around. Kieran, where can we find your excellent work on your podcast?
Well, I co-host the bafflingly successful Price of Football podcast with comedian Kevin Day. So we put out 2 episodes a week. One is a news show looking at the most recent football finance stories. When we started it 5.5 years ago, I think Kevin and I both looked together and going, we're not going to have enough stories to go on 3 or 4 episodes, and we're closing in on 700. We also do a listener's question show, and again, I said, who's going to take the trouble to write in for me to go and research questions on football finance? And I was spectacularly wrong. I think we've got a 9-month waiting list.
My God.
We really ought to do a Children in Need 24-hour special of me answering football finance questions to try to raise some money for a good cause.
Sheff Wednesday?
Yeah, I think there are better.
Joke. I'm sorry, it's a joke.
Better causes than not Sheffield Wednesday, but Dejon Chansiri.
There you go.
And I do think it's very important. You actually raise an important issue here, Ben, that there is a difference between a football club and a football club owner, and too often we merge our perception of the two. And I appreciate it's done for tribalism reasons. You've not paid your wages. You didn't pay St John's. But well, actually, it's not you. It's the club owner who made that decision.
Yeah, very much so. Kieran, thank you so much. Always so giving with your time. Get your comments in. Say nice things to Kieran, because obviously YouTube comments and Twitter are full of complete. Well, let's not go there. And Kieran, I will see you again this time next year. Rodney, we'll be millionaires.
That's right, for the Ipswich Town promotion party.
Stop it.